Attention! After watching this video, you might never look at snacking the same way again. I'm about to dive into why snacking is such a fascinating and crucial topic that needs to be discussed. So, why do people snack? Is it to prevent overeating? Perhaps to control their appetite by opting for light meals? Well, in reality, snacking increases insulin levels, leading to feeling hungry about 1.5 to 2 hours later. This means snacking not only stimulates appetite, but also encourages overeating. But why do people snack? Is it because they are hungry? It's a possibility. Is it to satisfy a craving? That's also possible. However, people snack for various reasons: stress, depression, anxiety, social influences, or simply because others are doing it. It could be a form of a social activity. Sometimes, the mere presence and accessibility of food are enough for people to feel the urge to snack. For instance, I used to be addicted to Doritos. If I started with one, I couldn't stop until the entire bag was finished. The next day, I would crave Doritos again. Similarly, during the times when I would indulge in a cup of Ben and Jerry's ice cream every night before bedtime, waiting until the next day to have it again was out of the question. Now, let me pose a question to you. What's worse, snacking or a high-carb diet when we compare these two? I'm referring to the situation where you follow a high-carb diet but avoid snacking, and on the other hand, solely rely on snacks as your primary source of nutrition. In my opinion, when you weigh these two factors, snacking appears to be worse than a high-carb diet. Allow me to share a personal transformation. A few years ago, when I weighed 211 pounds, my face was round and I had significant blood sugar issues. I was eating a lot. I decided to make a simple change. I stopped snacking and my weight dropped to 180 pounds. I firmly believe that snacking was the culprit. So, let me ask you a question. What's the real issue? Is it snacks or is it a high-carb diet? Now, when we compare these two, I'm talking about the situation where you practice a low-carb diet and compare it to relying solely on snacks for your nutrition. While I strongly recommend implementing a low-carb diet and avoiding snacking, if you were to compare these two scenarios, you would likely find that snacking is worse. Now, I want to share an intriguing study with you. This research concludes that snacking is the sole independent factor contributing to weight gain in children. Initially, you might think it's related to the quantity of junk food consumed and such. However, as we look at the variety of snacks consumed since the 1970s, it starts making more sense. I vividly remember that we didn't snack as much back then. Snacking significantly increased after 1977 and continued to rise gradually through the 80s and 90s. We've reached a point where approximately 97% of children are now being fed snacks. Back in the early 1970s, people didn't consume as many snacks. We used to have 3 meals a day, and we hardly experienced the kind of obesity issues we see today. Now, there are 2 primary ways to stimulate insulin. In fact, there are 3, but I'll focus on 2. One is adopting a high-carb diet, and the other is simply eating. Eating triggers insulin. In summary, practicing a high-carb diet and eating both stimulate insulin. Now, let's add snacking as the third stimulant. If you're having to snacks between your 3 meals, you're creating a frequent and repeated increase in insulin throughout the day. This doesn't allow your pancreas to drop and reset. It's akin to doing exercise once a day, compared to doing it 6 times or more. So, anything that causes a significant increase in insulin in the body eventually leads to insulin resistance, right? Insulin resistance is a condition where too much insulin is pumped out by the pancreas. In this situation, insulin can't be received by insulin receptors. So some parts of the body experience low insulin, while others are exposed to too much. Therefore, people with insulin resistance likely have high insulin levels if they were to test it. This leads to hyperinsulinemia when you have insulin resistance. And your pancreas can't catch up if you haven't been diabetic for a while. Insulin gradually starts to drop. Normally, insulin prevents your liver from making sugar, a process called gluconeogenesis. When insulin rises, the liver stops making new insulin, right? So, when you eat sugar, you cause high blood sugar because the liver stops. Even if you're not eating sugar, your liver can make insulin from non-carbohydrate sources, such as protein, fat, and even ketones. So, how does your liver produce a high amount of new sugar when there's already so much insulin in your blood? The reason is your insulin resistance. Your insulin isn't working. The body's feedback mechanism tells the pancreas they're not getting the right signal, so it keeps pumping more insulin. So in people who truly have insulin resistance, I believe they make up a significant portion of the population. In these individuals, there's an increase in gluconeogenesis, causing the liver to pump out sugar. This explains why, despite practicing a keto diet, your blood sugar may still be high, especially in the mornings. The reason for this is your insulin resistance. So, let me quickly go over what happens when there's too much insulin in your body. It affects your cognitive function. Memory starts to decline. Brain fog sets in. You lose focus and your mood changes. You become depressed, anxious, and irritable. It doubles your risk of cancer. Specifically, it doubles your risk of developing cancer, especially in the abdominal region. You gain weight around your internal organs. It increases your risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, diabetes, high blood pressure, and PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome. Your muscles weaken and your appetite increases. As mentioned earlier, you feel hungry every time you eat, approximately an hour and a half later. It initiates the formation of amyloid plaques in your brain, a precursor to Alzheimer's. Your liver starts to accumulate fat. Your visual ability diminishes, leading to impaired vision. And you may experience nerve and foot problems, known as neuropathy. There are two types of nutrients that don't stimulate insulin: fat and fiber. I'm not talking about synthetic fibers added to various keto products. I'm referring to fibers derived from vegetables, specifically leafy greens. When I say this, I don't mean fibers from grains that are high in carbohydrates. I'm talking about fibers from leafy green vegetables. Let me show you this on the next slide. Let's say you have an olive oil salad. This is an excellent combination to help correct insulin resistance. Alternatively, you can have celery with peanut butter immediately after a meal. Celery is mostly water and fiber with almost no sugar. Then add peanut butter on top. If you have the option to get raw milk cream, go for it. It's much healthier.